Today's episode is all about mold. How fun!
I love mold! The look of it, the taste of it, the smell of it, the texture.
So here's the situation. I'm helping a buddy out today. He recently bought a house and I think he bit off a little more than he could chew because he hasn't even moved in yet because he keeps running into problems like this one. So I'm in his basement right now, and this might be strange to some of you. This is a basement, and we have a structural wood floor. This is actually pretty typical. We see this a lot where we live. We have terrible soil, so they don't usually, well, sometimes they do, but it's common that they don't pour a concrete slab in the basement. They'll actually dig down an extra 4 feet or so and put a crawl space under your basement. Now, we don't usually have groundwater issues, which is nice because we don't worry about the wood floor molding normally. But in this case, he bought this house, he pulled up the carpet in this bedroom. Well, we don't really know what this room was supposed to be behind us. It's just a big empty room, had carpet in it, and he found a bunch of mold. The problem then got worse because under the carpet, there was actually concrete board, which was really strange, and we didn't know why somebody had installed that. And then under the concrete board was moldy wood, and the moldy wood was clearly installed by a homeowner at some point. So what we think happened here is the moisture was not coming up from the crawl space. Actually, we confirmed that. What happened, what we determined, was this room behind us, whoever lived here before us owned dogs, and they shouldn't be a dog owner, and they sound like they're a pretty terrible person because they were clearly locking the dogs in this room for an extended period of time, and the dogs were urinating on the carpet floor. The carpet floor then was getting saturated and mold began to grow. But what you should do if you ever suspect you have mold in your house on a large amount, like what you're going to see in this room behind me shortly here, first thing you do is stop, drop, and roll. I'm just kidding. The first thing you do is shut off your furnace. If you've got a furnace or AC unit that is blowing the air through your house and you disturb that mold, you're going to get all those mold spores and you're just going to distribute them through your house. You don't want to do that. The second thing you do, which he did do, is call a mold expert. You will need to find out what kind of mold it is it actively growing, how long has it been here, these kind of things that help you figure out what you're going to do to remediate it. So he did that. And we determined that the mold source was not coming from the crawl space, which was really great news, because if the mold was coming from the crawl space underneath this floor, then we would have much bigger issues. We would have mold on the structural joists of the house and those kind of things. So thank goodness the mold didn't come from the crawl space. Now, mold will always grow if it's in the right temperature and moisture situation. You get the right amount of moisture, the right amount of temperature, 48 hours, you're gonna have mold growth guaranteed. Now, the mold is already in your wood. The mold is in your house. It's in the air around us. Mold's all around us. It's in the cheese we eat. Mold's great. I love mold. It tastes really good in my cheese. The trick to not having a moldy house is not letting the mold out of the wood. Now, the dogs urinating on the floor let all the mold out of the wood. Now we got a problem, and now we got to get the mold out, and the mold is actually in the wood, so we actually have to remove, we got to bait this wood, we got to clean out this house. Now, my buddy got a handful of quotes, and people wanted to charge him a ridiculous amount of money. One person said he would come in here and simply treat the mold. He would spray it with a chemical, paint it with some kills, and tell him to cover it back up with some carpet for a lot of money. And that was not even the solution to the problem. I mean, I guess it could be, but the wood it's like spongy and it's starting to rot. It's really broken down. The other quote said that they would remove some of the drywall and then treat the wood. One person said for $1.5 tons of money, they would remove. They would do what we're gonna do today, and they wanted like $6,000 to actually remove the wood from the house. Now, this isn't rocket science. You do need to be careful. We're gonna wear respirators. You do need to be careful. You need to have some idea what you're doing, which you'll know after you finish watching this video, and make sure you click like and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. Basically what we're gonna do, we already hung up some plastic to make sure we don't get any contamination elsewhere in the house. This is gonna be our dirty side, and it's already walled off because it's a room over there. So we really just had to hang this plastic over the door and we're pretty good. Then we are going to there's 2 windows in the room. We're gonna hang 2 box fans in one window, blowing air out. So the mold remediation companies, when they come do this for you, they're gonna set up a low pressure zone by hanging plastic and setting up a fan blowing air out of the house in a clean way. They're gonna have fancy filters and all this kind of stuff on their fans. We're gonna use a couple box fans and we're gonna put some HEPA furnace filters over the fans just to make sure we're not blowing mold spores outside in any large amounts. Now this mold's already dead because it's been sprayed a number of times already and it's been sitting there, so we're really not at too much risk of getting mold outside the house. It's already outside. It rained this morning, which means there's already a ton of mold in the air. So we're gonna filter it just to be sure. We're gonna wear some PPE. And then once we're in this room behind me here, we're not gonna come out. So we're gonna stay in there. We're not gonna come out through the house because we don't wanna track any mold spores up the stairs and out the house with us. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go in and out through a window. Anything that's moldy drywall, we're gonna bag it. Any big sheets of plywood from the floor, we're going to carefully, we'd have to cut them up to bag them, which would just be putting more mold spores into the air, so we're probably not gonna cut those up. We're just gonna carefully lift them off the ground, haul them out the window, throw them in the dumpster, and call it a day. So here's how we do this. Look at all that mold. Moldy, 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 moldy. This is disgusting. If you're a dog owner and you lock your dogs in a room like this long enough that they can do this kind of damage, there's a special place for you. This is just terrible. All this moldy floor. Now under this floor, we peeled up this piece already the other day. It's sitting right there. There is insulation. There's a good chance that there's mold in this insulation, and this is not the right way to insulate your crawl space over a structural floor in a basement, because now this insulation might have actually been what let all this mold start growing, because it created a barrier between the wood and the carpet where all this mold could start growing. The proper way to insulate a crawl space, if you want to insulate it, would be to insulate the walls, the foundation walls, all the way around the perimeter, because you've got things like water coming in, sewer going out. There's no heat source down there, so if it got really into the negatives for a few days, that could technically freeze your water line coming into the house, because now you've insulated, you've created a zone between the warm room above it and the cold crawl space below it, and you actually want the heat from your house to go into that crawl space, have it nice and conditioned, and keep it a stable temperature, and make sure there's no moisture issues like we have here. So here's our plan. What we're gonna do, we're gonna put our fans going out right there. This is the window we're gonna go in and out of, hauling everything to the dumpster, and we're gonna cut. It seems like the dogs, when they were urinating, they were peeing on the walls a little bit too, so we're gonna cut a couple feet up off the ground, because that's where any mold will be. And we're gonna pull all that sheetrock off, we're gonna bag it, and then we're gonna carefully lift up all of this subfloor and haul it out. I think we're gonna remove the ceiling while we're at it, just because we're demoing, so we might as well just get it out. And then that'll should be done here, and shouldn't take too long. We're gonna get a few guys in here, and this will be, I'm guessing, 4 hours worth of work for a few guys for what a mold mediation company wanted to charge my buddy about $6,000 to do for him. So if you got mold, you can do this. Now, a situation where maybe you couldn't do this yourself is if you actually had mold coming up from the crawl space and you had mold growth on the structural components of the wood. In that case, you would need a professional company to come out and treat it, because you can't tear out those pieces. None of this is structural down here, so we can tear all this out carefully and save my buddy a bunch of money.
Grab those bars. Yep, that's the one. No, there should be like a whole box of them.
There's our negative pressure zone. The professionals will use a fancy fan to do this. We just use plastic box fans and some HEPA furnace filters, and that will be blowing all the air out of the room. So we have negative pressure, so none of those mold spores can float into other parts of the house. This was the first giveaway that the previous homeowner intentionally covered this up, because there's the first layer of sheetrock and then a second layer of sheetrock. So the dogs were peeing on the wall and then they just went ahead and intentionally covered it up. Look at all that mold. That's just absolutely disgusting.
Hey, 3 sheets of drywall. It sucks. Oh man, look at that. Sick. I'll come up again, help you home.
Here's the second giveaway that a previous homeowner finished this room themselves, because look at that gap at the top. So they clearly did this themselves. No professional sheetrocker would leave a gap at the top and then just cover it with a piece of trim. So it was very clear that the previous homeowner insulated everything, walls, ceiling, and floor, sheetrocked it themselves in order to have a soundproofed room to lock their dogs in. So before we move on to the next step, we just ran through the room with a shop vac. We got a HEPA filter on here just to suck up any mold spores that might be loose sitting on the surface, just to have a nice clean room before we move on. So the moldy plywood does run underneath the wall framing, and we did have to run along the edge with the skill saw, just followed behind with the shop vac to suck up any mold spores that the saw might be kicking up. And this way we can start pulling up the floor. He'll have to treat the wood around the edges because there's no way to pull that out. So the original plan was to pull up entire sheets of plywood. This was next to impossible because we found out the plywood was actually screwed down. We tried to remove the screws, we couldn't get them out. But this was another giveaway that the previous homeowner intentionally finished this room with the sound barrier for their dogs, because they pulled up the original floor that the builder had installed. They insulated the floor, and then when they put their new floor back down, they screwed it, which no builder would do. They would use ring shank nails. But anyways, we had to move on to a different plan because there was no way to pull these up whole. So we moved on to this plan, which was to cut the floor sheeting in between each joist with the skill saw, just running behind with the shop vac again, and this just made it so much easier to pull the flooring up since we couldn't get the screws out. So there you go, no more moldy floor. All the mold has been removed from this room, and now my buddy can put it back together with some clean building materials, and he'll never lock dogs in here. And if you lock dogs in your basement long enough to cause this kind of damage, I don't have anything good to say about you. Hey, the day of mold demo is done. Who doesn't like mold? I mean, come on, mold. Everybody likes mold. So you can tell I changed my clothes. I put on some fresh clothes before I got in the truck. So if you're a naysayer and you're watching this, you might say,
Oh, you weren't wearing tie-back suits.
just bagged our clothes. I'll wash them when I get home. I put on some fresh clothes to get in the truck. And I was talking to my buddy before I left, and he said, no man, I got bits to do this, and all the work we did today was gonna cost me $10,000. I think I was saying $6,000 at the beginning of the video, but it was actually gonna be a $10,000 job. There was 4 of us there. Less than a full day's worth of work, almost a full day. That was a big job, and $10,000 he just saved. He had a $450 dumpster, was his only cost. So anyways, thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe, and another video coming at you soon. Peace.